the country, and that's not an accident. And in 2026, for the first time in decades, nobody really knows who's going to be the next governor of this state. So tonight we're sitting down with a candidate who says both parties have built this mess together and neither one has the will to clean it up. And we're going to discuss that all on tonight's episode of the California Underground, starting right now. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning into another episode of the California Underground podcast. I am your host, Phil, and we have a special guest with us tonight. As always, we've been having a lot of candidates because it is 2026 and a lot of people are running for different types of offices. So tonight we have Tom Woodard, who's on the show. He's a Libertarian candidate, and we're going to bring him in right now. And as always, with me is my trusty co-host, the best, the fastest researcher in the West. So Camille, welcome to the show. And Tom, also welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Let's just dive right in. Why don't you give us a little bit about who you are and a little bit of background, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty about your platform and your run for governor.
Okay, my name's Tom Woodard, born and raised in California. Oldest of 5 boys, have an older sister. Went to San Diego State University, have lived over a third of my life outside the country, living and working in the Dominican Republic and Mexico. I'm bilingual in Spanish from that experience, but I spoke pretty good Spanish before I left. Father to 4. My son passed away 5.5 years ago. That informs a lot about my campaign because he died addicted and with mental illness that we fought for 17 years before he passed. And that experience has given me a lot of insight into those issues of homelessness and drugs, et cetera. So I've had a very interesting life business-wise. I've started a few businesses. Some have been successful, some have been not so successful. Been very entrepreneurial. I've had a lot of leadership positions, and I felt compelled to run as opposed to hang up my cleats. I just turned 70 2 weeks ago, and I'm so compelled by what I see and my concern for the situation that our state is in and the lessons I've learned from my son's passing that I jumped in the race after starting to write a book about the future of California and then realizing, this is a platform and maybe I should express it more roundly.
I want to say,
look like you have a question. You're ready to go. You're ready to jump off the start off the conversation.
I want to say happy birthday, and I'm so sorry to hear about your son. I do love that this is personal for you because so often we have candidates that jump in as kind of like it's more just a platform for them. Right. We've seen that happen so often, and so anyway, I don't actually have a question yet, but do tell us more. Actually, I do have a question. Tell me about your businesses. Let's start there because I know that has something to do kind of with where you've gotten to this point as well. So can you tell us a little bit more about your businesses?
Oh, sure. I've been involved in everything from food processing, amusement rides. I worked for 12 years for Allergan, the eye surgical and eye care company. I was a top sales rep in surgical devices for Allergan for 6 years worldwide. I started a successful Mexican restaurant in Park City, Utah that was named Best Mexican in Utah for 6 years. I was a president of the North American Bungee Association and franchised bungee jumping towers to amusement parks back in the early 90s.
Wow.
Jeez. Because of my Spanish, I've been a trainer for Latin America for surgical devices, and I've sold equipment and food processing into Latin America and lived in the Dominican Republic for 4 years. Was a volunteer with hurricane refugees in 1980, which led to me founding a nonprofit, which is 42 years old and working in 10 countries now and going into an 11th this year. They're involved in reforestation. They loan money to small farmers so that they can convert to tree cropping, which pretty much restores their land and saves it from what I saw, hurricane rains that caused massive mudslides, et cetera. and they're working now in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and Mexico. I founded a private nature preserve on the Sea of Cortez and managed that through a lot of litigation in Mexico for 18 years, and that's going well. It was bought out by one of the wealthy people in the world with the idea to conserve it in perpetuity. A lot of life and a lot of science going on. I'm pretty
I'm
much
really impressed, actually.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm kind of tired.
honestly.
I'm exhausted listening to your accomplishments.
Like, okay.
I'm trying to think of all the stuff I've done. I'm like, man, I haven't really scratched the surface.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah. So we have I think that kind of probably leads into your stances as a libertarian, this idea of working so much in the private sector and entrepreneurship and small businesses and seeing it from that angle, because I think a lot of people, when they do run businesses, they see politics through a completely different lens than when they've never ran a business. Was it always, I guess, not to get in the weeds on your political party, but was that something that shaped your politics, the private entrepreneurship, the business ownership? Did that have a way in shaping your political philosophy that you have now?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, for most of my life, was apolitical. I was not interested in the process. I kind of detested it. You know, it was distasteful to me. And I first registered and got involved in politics after 1984 in 2016. So between 1984 and 2016, I had my opinions, I had my preferences. I didn't vote between 1984 and 2016, and I was mostly overseas. I tried to vote and got scammed by a group that was supposedly going to take care of everything if you were American overseas and you wanted to vote. But because of my party preference, which I listed in 2016 as Libertarian, I didn't get my documents from them. Then I found out they were a Democratic group that was trolling for people to register overseas unless they weren't Democratic. So it's kind of interesting. Now, since then, I've been too concerned about the condition of the country in general. California, now that I've moved back and relocated here 18 months ago. And so my basic philosophy is that man has several ways to concoct governance and to control governance. And yet the societies that are the most wealthy and the most successful, to me, are the ones that capacitate individual initiative. I think we're way smarter as individuals that are motivated by our own motivations in things that we really love to do and to work at than any government ever was, any central planning ever was, any communal ownership ever was. And I think that goes all the way back to our history of thousands and tens of thousands of years ago, you know, that our individual initiative is probably a driving force on human ingenuity, creativity, success and survival, etc. And I believe that today. And hence I'm a libertarian.
Yeah, I've always said one of my core philosophies, and we're going to get into the policies in your platform because there's a lot I want to discuss there. I always find that, especially with California, the ruling class or the ruling elite right now, those in Sacramento, it's almost like they have a lack of faith in humanity to the point where they have to be this nanny state where they run every part of your life because they don't believe you're smart enough or capable to do anything. So it's almost like we've gotten in this, at least California has gotten in this mindset of you can't operate without the government. My whole political philosophy is flipped on its head, where it said, I think you get government out of the way because I have faith in humanity. I think when you let humanity do what it has to do, we are incredibly intelligent. We're incredibly innovative. We're incredibly entrepreneurial. Like, there is so much ability of mankind that needs to be unleashed that the state right now in California, just the way it's set up, kind of crushes that. That's how it feels, right? Here in California.
Absolutely. It's, you know, if you look at, take my parents' generation, the incredible transformation of technology during their generation. My parents were born in the late 20s, you know, that they saw in their life. And then you take what I've seen in my life. I just completed 70, as I said, and the amazing technical and technological transportation and the advances in all areas. You can't mostly point to governments as the source of those innovations. It was all people in private sectors, and that's a stark example. Governments are not visionary. Very, very seldom can governments ever even pull off visionary. They're more of a big pot that they try to mediate and mitigate competing interests. But the true innovations that have changed the world and changed our life, and by the way, lifted 2 billion people out of abject poverty in the last 40 years, is private enterprise and private innovation. And I believe in it very much. I think the government, when it gets too big, it gets oppressive. Sometimes because they want to stay in power, they become dominated by ideologies and political ideologies that they want to enforce, which oftentimes are really just a reflection of personal principles, but not something that should take place among governance of everybody. It should be by the people and for the people. So it's kind of turned on its head. I agree with you. It's upside down. And I'm making it a point not to attack people in this, but to attack policies. We can easily see the policies that are choking us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not hard. You don't have to look too far. California is the highest cost of living state in the country for very good reasons.
Yeah.
And many of those reasons can be undone if we have the will.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a perfect segue into my first question about your platform. You brought up the cost of living. I mean, gas and energy are probably the biggest drivers of cost of living here in California. Some of it, but probably the two biggest is gas and energy. Everything stems from gas and energy. And you have a pretty comprehensive platform about how to tackle that. Walk us through your plan on how to tackle gas prices and energy prices here in California.
Okay, so what's happening, and in this year, I predicted in an article I wrote in November that gas would be at $6.50 a gallon. Of course, it is right now, and it's higher than I have an $8.10 a gallon photo from Los Angeles last week or 2 weeks ago. But my policy is this, and it's based on my life experience. I founded a nonprofit that now this year is closing in on 100 million trees planted. On top of that, the nursery that I founded that was owned by a nonprofit in the Dominican has produced another 105 million seedlings for other groups and other projects. And we had an assessment by an outside group that did an assessment, a year and a half, I think it took. And they determined that the nonprofit that I founded had lifted over 900,000 people out of poverty. Trees are good news. You can make a lot more money farming them, especially the rapid growing varieties that we focused on a lot of times, although we also have focused on fruit trees and intercropping and things like that. But farmers are able to restore their land and groundwater sources and nutrient cycling and make a lot more money at it. And so we've had a lot of success. We basically loan money to small farmers that are not credit worthy. And we've had a very low rate of default. It turns out that when you give poor people an opportunity and it's real, and you have extension agents and you do soil studies and market studies and you understand everything it takes to help them mount their farms and get businesses up, that it works. And now jumping to California today. There's 5 problems that we have, and I really like solving multiple problems at once. A lot of times the problems the state labors under are related. You think of homelessness, immigration, drug use, all the things that have happened that have led to those problems of housing costs, et cetera. Well, this is one where we have maybe 5 problems we can solve at once, what you've asked. California has 15 million acres that are impacted by bark beetle infestation, by fires, and by overexploitation historically that have never been replanted. Now, you go to the fuel side, gasoline, diesel, energy costs. The reason that California is the #1 state as far as cost of energy is because they have a narrative that they've stuck to, and that is that atmospheric CO2 creates runaway global warming. And so they've instituted a series of laws, cap and trade, carbon recapture, excise taxes, special fees on fuels, et cetera, that adds up to us being by far the most expensive place to refine oil, to drill and produce oil, and also to sell it and market, and there's just too many fees that they've heaped on top of it. You are completely right, and I agree with you that energy is crucial for everything in the economy. We have transportation, we have cold storage, we have manufacturing, we have machinery, we have our homes and everything else, and energy is where it starts. So if energy goes up, the price of everything goes up, and that's why we're probably the highest cost of living. But let's look at it in a more nuanced way even. California has driven 35 refineries out of this to closure in the state since 1991. In December 15th, the San Pablo Bay pipeline stopped operations. That was what took oil from the California oil fields to the refineries in the Bay Area. Done. We don't have anything to replace that. It's sitting there not being used. We also have 80 to 100,000 Gen Zers that are leaving the state per year because they can't afford to live here. They can't afford to start families, buy a home, pay for, they can't find adequate employment to cover the cost of living. A lot of times they live 5 or 6 to an apartment, and or living with their parents, et cetera. It's why we have a housing shortage, et cetera. So all those costs, extra costs heaped on gasoline are politically driven. Mm-hmm. What's happened now is we are importing over 30% of our fuel from outside the country. Now, those refineries in China, India, and other places where we're getting fuel, or any place that we're getting crude oil, don't have the same standards that we do as far as production, as far as CO2 emissions. They're not as clean. And then they put the fuel on tanker ships and ship them across the Pacific using bunker fuel. The net result is that they produce 38% more CO2 than if we had used California oil, refined it in California, where we would be the lowest cost producer because it's just the logistics are the easiest. Mm-hmm. If we hired 100,000 youth in a program that I call the CCCA, 50,000 new recruits a year on a 2-year program, 50,000 graduate every 2 years, that 75% of them were deployed to plant 3 billion trees between now and 2051, which, by the way, is roughly the same number that they planted under the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps under Roosevelt, then we could restore that entire 15 million acres. What would that do? That would give us habitat. It will give us more groundwater collection and equalized flow throughout the year to the Pacific. It would fix 3 times the atmospheric CO2 as all of our regulations put together. And it would employ these youth that would leave. They would get $1,600 a month plus room and board and insurance and a $30,000 scholarship or a grant at the end of their 2 years for graduating from the program. The other 25% would be deployed clearing brush, making fire breaks, and dealing with the places that fires are probably the most probable or the most dangerous to break out, affecting population centers, et cetera. And they would restore wetlands, which are critical right now if we're going to have a coastal biome at all. Mm-hmm. So here we can lower to below $4 a gallon. We can plant 3 billion trees. We can fix 75 million metric tons a year of CO2, and we could employ youth that otherwise don't have an opportunity to work outside or know California's wilderness or be involved in something so constructive as to restore the 15 million acres that are essentially destroyed from human activity. Mm-hmm. So that's my policy on that. And it's something I know something about. I've been involved in tree planting since I was 27 when I founded that organization. And I believe that this is doable, and I have financial models to prove it.
I think this is it's a very creative solution in terms of thinking more in terms of what can we do and what can we not do, kind of in an abundance mindset of we can fix these things by proactively planting more trees, creating more, helping with the CO2, helping here. And I'm a fan of that. I'm always, if you listen to the show, we've always talked about an abundance mindset here in California rather than this restrictive mindset that the state has put on us. Um, so we're talking about both the ecological solution. I want to drive down a little bit more on what you could do as governor in terms of suspending these cap and trade rules and these regulations and unleashing our oil industry and bringing back refineries and producing oil here that adheres to our standards, provides good jobs, creates a booming economy for middle class and blue collar workers. Is that something that if you were governor, you would do on day one using your governor powers to
Day
try
one.
and okay.
The governor possesses emergency powers and can declare an emergency for 3 years, for 36 months, and then redeclare the emergency still at the end of 36 months.
Mhm.
We could circumvent those particular charges immediately, driving down gasoline and incenting the industries that exist, the refineries that are shut down but still in operating condition or shortly would be, the San Pablo Bay Pipeline, and the oil fields of Kern and Bakersfield. By the way, the one thing I might have omitted or not added was all of the planting would be done by private groups. Municipalities could engage NGOs and private companies to do the planting. It would not be state managed. It would be designed and funded, and that's it.
I actually had that question, so thank you.
You know, the state should not be managing functions that can be managed in the private sector with more efficiency and greater results. My opinion is we're just not good at it, and it's okay. It's the nature of the animal. I'm not throwing stones, but governments with central planning do not have the efficiency of the private sector, period.
Well, it's also we're such a big state that 58 counties, we're kind of like our own little mini United States here. And the more you try and run through Sacramento, the more it doesn't work because California is just so different from, all the way up to I call it the state of Jefferson, all the way down here to San Diego. It's such a huge state. You have to decentralize and localize these solutions. And usually people on the ground know better than Sacramento, who's hundreds of miles away. We have our first question for you from the chat. Somebody said Bill O'Reilly called California the most corrupt state in America. Do you agree? And what would be your plans to eliminate fraud and corruption in California?
Well, first of all, I agree based on what I know right now. I think that all of us, including the person who asked the question, most probably we only are getting a tip of the iceberg right now about possibly what's happened in the state. It's looking pretty dire between the loans that were made during COVID, some of the Medicare fraud that's going on with hospice and with senior health care and transportation and all that. First of all, it has to be completely and utterly investigated and exposed. But it's a very difficult thing to do with our current system. It would take a lot of work just to get in and expose it and understand it. But one of the things that I'm proposing is that we do a rapid assimilation of AI and government functions that can be tendered to AI so that we can cut the payroll of government. We've grown enormously. We are way bloated as far as our payroll. And when you talk about a very expensive state, all you have to do is look at the amount of growth. For example, we've had an administration of the university system. We have 3 times the administrators since the internet came online, and we should have had this revolution of efficiency that we haven't had yet. And we cannot stand in the way and block what's coming. It's a technological revolution that whether we like it or not, it's going to be here. If California wants to be a leader in the technical revolution that's coming in robotics, in AI, in EVTOLs, in housing, in desalination, in fusion power in the future, in autonomous transport, et cetera, then cannot be the highest cost state in the country. We have to be a lower cost state. We can't lose our entrepreneurial class to out-migration because they can't afford to live here. So what I would do to answer his question is, with AI, the one good thing about AI is auditing. You have immediate audit of money that's spent. And the fact that we have had audits turned down and we're not auditing certain programs is ridiculous. We need to know where our money's going and why so much is necessary that we have to now institute taxes that people can't afford.
It's crazy in today's, with all the technology we have, that we can't track every single. We had Herb Morgan on a couple of weeks ago, and he had this same kind of idea of implementing AI to track, as the comptroller, to look at every single expenditure in the state and see where money's going and kind of audit in real time. And with AI, you could do that. And it's surprising we haven't even before AI, I think we could have done that. But with AI now, that could be done almost automatically, 24/7. They could just be running the numbers and double checking. If something doesn't hit a certain parameter, it could be notified to the governor or to the legislature. So it's crazy. They don't, it's almost like it's a, what do they call that? It's not a bug, it's a feature. They want it to be ensconced in darkness and behind all these hard places to find. So
that question is paramount, and that's why I say I don't want to throw any stones, but it wouldn't have been that hard to understand where our money's going, and a lot of money's being wasted. If you think about the monopoly and governance that one party has had in the state, it actually goes back to 1959. Yes, we've had a few Republican governors, but the control of the legislature and the state Senate has been largely one party. And whenever you have a concentration of power over human history in one group at the expense of everybody else, corruption flourishes. We have to have open books. We have to understand that we have to live within our means. And what I've designed is actually something that goes completely the other way. That we implement AI across a broad spectrum of government services that are easily converted to that. I think we could reduce the payroll of the state down to 80,000 non-university employees. The universities are a particular other mess that I would like to talk about with another on another thread, because that's where a lot of money is also being wasted. But back to the point, we have all this money we've spent on homelessness, on Medicare and Medicaid, and all the things that we've been hearing in the news lately, et cetera, that it doesn't make sense that we have a $39 billion budget deficit this year. It doesn't make sense that we owe $1.25 trillion if you count unfunded liabilities. But if we follow my plan, by 2038, we would have paid all the debt down and all the unfunded liabilities. And I am proposing that we would take 25% of the savings that we would realize from several programs that I'm offering, and we would start what's called a Commonwealth Fund. A Commonwealth Fund is like a California, picture it as a California Opportunity Endowment Fund, where only private firms in California that are investment firms are managing capital, this paired with private capital sometimes, et cetera, and invested in new California businesses to attract businesses to the state, to attract industry and job creations. And by the way, these businesses in robotics and in AI and in modular home building and a lot of the things that are coming online, EVTOLs, I think would be a great technology for our state. And to reopen our oil industry, you're talking about millions of jobs we would create. And at the same time, we would be saving money so fast and we would be building it so fast. That fund could have $5 trillion in it by 2051. A $5 trillion fund that Californians own could fund government. We would be endowed. We wouldn't have any taxes. And yet at the same time, instead of just taxing and trying to pay back these enormous debts that we've incurred, we're actually investing a small part of the savings in growing businesses in California that helps us outgrow that much faster. And so that's my proposal.
I'm kind of not understanding that. Would that be a tax, or because you're saying investment, but would that be then a tax on these businesses? And when you say commonwealth, I'm not going to lie, I hear share the wealth. So will you will you tell me a little more about that? And maybe everyone else
I'll tell
understands.
you, here's a better word for it than Commonwealth. It's a sovereign wealth fund. And so it's owned by everybody in California. But it's not managed by the state or dictated by the state. The politics don't affect where it's invested, et cetera. It's done by private firms. Now, where would the money come from? From the savings that we would get from the programs that I would implement. The programs would be a modular educational system, which costs not $30,000 per student, but $12,000 per student per year, K through 12, that is. The savings is enormous. The lowering to 80,000 employees in state-run institutions that's fivefold. The savings is enormous. By taking 25% of what we save, yes, it would still come from taxes originally, and investing it. It's like, let's use a personal example. Let's say you owed $100,000 and you were making $3,000 a month and your costs were $2,000. Oh, you need 100 months to pay that back, right? But if you paid it back at $500 a month, it would take 200 months, unless that other 500 was being invested, which is what I'm proposing. Now it might take you 20 months because the investment grows, it's involved in growth, and it's not being paid to anybody, and your money grows. Your interest grows, the interest the next year grows, et cetera. And yet everybody owns this. Now, what is that money being doing for us? It's being invested in fomenting industry and business development in California by private firms. They would be rated on how much returns they're getting on the money, et cetera. That's how we would determine with a private board of directors how those funds are dispersed every year. If it gets just a modicum of interest, if it was just 5% a year, it would be a $5 trillion fund by the early 2050s. That's more than enough to generate interest to pay the entire cost of the state. It's a fairly radical idea, but at the same time, it's a doable idea, and I have financial models to show that.
So there's been a couple questions in a row about, I guess we can tackle both of them, sort of the issue of immigration and California being a sanctuary state. So there's a couple questions about that in the chat, if you want to address that.
Okay, now, first of all, let me give a nod to libertarian theory, which would, not have borders around the world. Everybody had a free flow of human beings everywhere and all that. Now, the problem is that we live in a world where there are ideologies that want to completely do away with us and destroy the U.S. There are also criminal and subversive, aside from subversive ideologies, there are criminals that come to the country to exploit Americans. I believe that we need immigration laws so that those people are not welcome in the country. And we need to have enforcement. The only internal enforcement we have of those laws right now is ICE. But they've overstepped precisely, in my opinion, because of, quote, sanctuary laws. What it does is it stacks one group of people up against another group of people among our own citizens. It doesn't have to be that way. So my proposal is that state, police, highway patrol, any state law enforcement agencies would investigate, round up, and capture and arrest criminal and subversive elements that are immigrants that shouldn't be in the country. And then within their own confines, turn them over to federal agents, whatever they're called, whatever agency comes out of this, so that they can be deported successfully under our immigration laws. But the immigrants that were enticed to be here by the last 4 years of the administration of Washington, D.C., they were incented to come here, pell-mell. Now, there's a lot of nuanced points about how they got here and why they got here and who was in charge of that. I don't need to go there. What I can say is that if you take any of the numbers, by far, most of the people that have come here are looking for a new life. They're looking for a better life, and they're escaping circumstances, sometimes circumstances that our own demand for illegal drugs have caused even. There are a lot of drug war refugees in Latin America, especially in Mexico. From 2006, when Felipe Calderon was elected president of Mexico and did a deal with George Bush as president, they tried to do a capture and extradite the drug kingpin leaders to the US, just like they had done in Colombia successfully. The problem is Mexico is not Colombia. It has a 2,000-mile border with us, and it's the world's 10th largest economy, has 112 million people. And we're super related to them. That's the largest demographic group, immigrant group in the country. And in California, our history is integrally related. Now, I say I lived outside California for 20 years in Mexico, but I lived where California started in Loreto, first capital of California, first colony, European colony in California, first church, and where the expeditions left from to found the first of many missions in Alta California, where we live now. I believe that California needs immigration, and it needs to find a pathway to citizenship for the people that are here that are only looking to better the lives of themselves and their families. They were incented to be here under false pretenses, maybe under ludicrous circumstances that shouldn't have happened, but they're here. And it will cost enormous amounts to get rid of them. It's incredibly disruptive. It caused some of these passions that are fueling the street demonstrations and violence and things. And at the same time, nobody wants hardened criminals or subversives that want to blow buildings up here. And so I think a rational way to handle this is to lobby Washington, offer our support with our own law enforcement in California, in exchange for finding a new pathway to citizenship for the people that are non-criminal immigrants that are looking to better their lives and have families and be here. And secondly, frankly, California is not reproducing with native Californians to replacement level. And we need immigration, and we should have for the future, a controlled, patterned, well thought out immigration system. But in the meantime, we have up to 3 million illegal immigrants in California right now, undocumented immigrants in California. And if you take that, together with the Latino population, Latino Hispanic descent population of 43%, is closer to 46% of the population. No, I think a smart and sensitive and human, compassionate way to handle this is to lobby for a new dispensation for California, a guest worker program leading to citizenship eventually, and opportunities, special insurance funds, privately made, not state run, for immigrants that are here that aren't citizens yet, so that health insurance is available to them, and they have to have it if they're going to be an immigrant in the state. But those kind of nuances, I think California can pull off, and that's what I'm proposing.
I did want to pivot a little bit to talk about one of the most prevalent and probably visible issues here in California, which is homelessness. We've thrown a ton of money at it. We all know the numbers: 24 billion, 34 billion, 50 billion. I don't know. At this point, Prop 1 is going to be worth 10 billion by the time we pay it back. Homelessness hasn't gone down, and it's just state failure after state failure after state failure. And it seems like no matter how much money California throws at homelessness, it doesn't move the needle at all. And this is one issue where I think if someone were on the outside looking in, how does a libertarian address homelessness by, using the government, but also how does someone like a libertarian wrap their head around that, I guess, is the question.
Well, this libertarian, I'm the father of 4 children, but my son died 5.5 years ago, my only son, and he was my oldest. At the age of 20, he developed schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder. He became homeless at times, addicted to opiates, in and out of rehab, halfway homes, hospitals, doctors, lawyers, minor infractions, etc., for 17.5 years. And then he died in my arms in Mexico, where I bought him a little house. I've walked through cities with thousands of homeless trying to find him, and I found him every time. 3 different cities, Tijuana, San Diego, and Salt Lake City. And I hired consultants. I went to NAMI meetings. I went to parent meetings. I went to everything I could do to get help. The laws are stacked against families that have addicted members and that have what's called a dual diagnosis, an underlying mental illness. If you switch over now to homelessness, it was going down between 2004 and 2011 and then took a sharp turn and went up. That was the advent of a lot of artificial opiates, pill form, etc. And then really cheap crystal meth, which has been around for 40 years. As addiction went up, homelessness has gone up. If you, depending on the study, and by the way, I have a hard time trusting studies from the state, but if you look at private studies, they estimate between 75 and 80% of the people on the street are or have been recently addicted to heavy drugs. And heavy drug use is a major part of why they end up on the street homeless with all their family and friends exhausted or dead or broke from trying to help them. And they're out of gas. And yet they're addicted and they want to live out their addiction. None of the money that you're mentioning that California has spent goes to helping them overcome their situation, which is basically addiction. One of the hardest things I ever had to deal with were the laws in the United States, where unless you're a danger to yourself or others, and it's an imminent danger, and that needle has moved a lot as we've had a lot of homeless. You have to have a major psychotic event or something. Nobody can hold you or force you into treatment. I would institute, and yes, this is somewhat non-libertarian, but here's what I would do based on my experience. I call it Joshua's Law, that anybody found intoxicated or high and camping on a city street or sidewalk or park or facility where they don't have a home, they don't have a place to go, would be mandated to a 90-day detox and analysis program done in the private sector. Depending on the problem that we're dealing with, some of those people cannot get better. They have physical ailments, they have mental ailments, they're not going to be able to get out in the workforce, they're not going to be able to be productive. But a lot of them can be. And so when we talk about housing, I'll talk to you about my housing ideas. But once they're detoxed and once they're medically analyzed, then you can design exactly what that individual needs. And that's helping them. It's helping them get from here to there. Maybe it's a modular home. Modular homes are certainly way cheaper than what we've been spending per homeless at sometimes $300 a night in California for hotel rooms, which doesn't do anything except wreck the hotel room when people are just shooting up all day in them and having the people that don't have the hotel room. It's really, it doesn't help anything. So we're spending all this money and throwing at it. And by the way, I think there's enormous fraud in that industry as well. The homeless industrial complex is a big business. And it's not affecting anything. It's not reducing homelessness. It's grown under this administration, the current administration, and it's been growing since 2011. Mm-hmm. We have 1/3 of the homeless in the country. Part of that is because of the largesse that we heap on them, and part of it is climate and all that. You know, we have more welcoming places for homeless to survive without facing the elements. We need to be smart about this. California's streets and sidewalks and cities are not designed to house human beings living where they shouldn't be living. It's not hygienic. It's fueled a lot of times by crime. It destroys businesses and business traffic, which is how cities were designed. And I would say zero homelessness is the goal, zero in California. If you're found on a city street in California intoxicated, you need to go in a program and find out what the issue is, and then see how that private program can help you. Mm-hmm. The second thing is that this housing situation, we can provide much cheaper kind of product now with technology that would circumvent the cost of housing and the cost of living, so that some of the people that aren't ever going to be able to do anything except live out their years in whatever peace they can are not going to be able to make money, but the cost of sustaining them by society would be not even close to what we're paying today.
Mm-hmm. It's Well, it's interesting. This is sort of like, if anybody knows anything about libertarians, is they're so worried about being like pure libertarians that it's almost like reality doesn't meet like their pure ideology. And what you're proposing on homelessness would totally not be libertarian. It would be the idea of this people coming in and telling you what you can and cannot do, and mandating you to do something. But it is reality, and it is something that has to be done, because we're talking about the pour over effect, like you're saying, is obviously there's a human cost. There's a human cost that these individuals are suffering on the street, and we need to do something about it. We need to help these people, and just throwing money at the situation doesn't seem to be helping. And drugs and substance abuse are a huge part of it. It's also an issue for safety. It's a public safety issue for those who are walking around these city streets. It's also a business issue, and it's an economic issue of, okay, well, if downtown San Diego is littered with homeless people or full of homeless people, I shouldn't say littered, that's offensive, but it's full of homeless people. People aren't going to go to downtown San Diego. They're not going to frequent the restaurants or the bars, or they're going to not going to go to a Padres game or something like that because they don't like it. It encompasses all these things. So you have to kind of have to take this reality and look at it and go, we have to get tough on this. Otherwise, it's not benefiting anybody. It's just you're almost feeding the problem and making it worse by
We
just throwing billions
we
of dollars.
absolutely are making it worse because we're not dealing with it. But to my libertarian friends, I am a libertarian idealist. At the same time, the way to preserve personal freedom and personal responsibility to capacitate a population so that they can flourish means they have to be safe. Having people living on our streets that weren't designed for that, that are surviving a lot of times by largesse from the government and by crime, is not safe. And so you have to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, this is not okay for the rest of the population. The function of government is to protect that population. I don't propose that the state run any of those programs. I propose that they be tendered out to private sector providers of these services, like detoxification analysis, et cetera. And possibly the state contributes facilities that they have for developments for modular homes, et cetera, for communities like that. Maybe there's many ways that we can get involved. We can attract the private sector also to get involved in this, et cetera, with volunteerism, which I really believe in. But we cannot tolerate 185,000 homeless that we have in California right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have a couple minutes left here. I did want to touch on a couple more things really quickly before we let you go for the night. People in the chat always ask. We have sort of a pro Second Amendment audience. I myself am pro Second Amendment as well. A lot of people asking, what is your stance on Second Amendment in California? Because California is notoriously not friendly to the Second Amendment here in California.
Well, I'm a libertarian, and I believe that people have the right to defend themselves, and by whatever means necessary. You cannot be subjected to a culture or a society where only the criminals have arms. I'm very much, I like the Bill of Rights. To me is one of the most important documents ever written, and it embodies some of the most important freedoms that man should enjoy. And I think trying to control that is another overreach by government. I understand the issue of violence. I reject the argument that guns cause violence. I think people do. And so I'm pro Second Amendment as well.
I have some rapid fire questions I want to ask, but I want to let Camille follow up with any questions.
Well, I feel like this conversation just got so deep, and my questions were lighthearted, but you're clearly a very well-read man, and I like to ask this question to some of our guests. A few of your favorite books that you would recommend people read.
How old are people?
What's that?
How old would the people be?
18 and above. Even or
Oh,
high
because
school.
there's different. I think for young people, I would read Atlas Shrugged, and I would read some of Rand Paul's articles and writings. I would read a Libertarian Manifesto. I would read books by my friend Lawrence Samuels, and there's some fantastic libertarian authors. Again, though, to Phil's point, libertarianism, as opposed to the other two parties, which, if you look at their history, are fairly pragmatic over time, is more of an operative philosophy of governance. And it's very idealistic. The ideals have to be modified sometimes because of the nuances of what we're dealing with. But at the same time, I hold those ideals to be really important. So there's a plethora of great books. And those are some of the ones that I would recommend just right off the bat.
Okay, so rapid fire, couple last questions. So like real quickly, quick answers. First one thing about California that still makes you proud.
It's incredible diversity and it's incredible natural wildlife and environments, both coastal, inland, mountain, deserts, redwood forests, the northern part of the state. It's an incredible place. The diversity of people here. We have great Persian cultures and we have Filipino communities that are fantastic, and Asian cultures, and we have Latin cultures, and we have, actually, it's kind of an interesting esoteric thing that the blood of all the people that have struggled to control California over the last 400 years is all here. It's all here in the state right now. It's embodied a lot of times even in the immigrants, which are all, they're European, mestizo, indigenous, Hispanic mix. Here we are, and we have a chance to do the right thing with this state. We're smart enough. We know enough now. We're not going to make the mistakes of the past if we get busy. And I think the thing I'm most proud about and the thing that gives me the most hope is the future.
Okay. The single most wasteful line item in a state budget that nobody talks about.
The single most wasteful one. That's a hard one for me, but
yeah, there's a lot to narrow down. I know.
That's a lot. It's just the wasteful spending in general. I'm sorry, that's not a single line item, but if I hit categories, we'd be here a lot longer than we have left.
A quick little answer.
Yeah.
One California politician, either party, any party, who you think is actually doing their job.
Carlo De Mayo.
Carl DeMaio? Okay.
Yeah, Carl De Mayo. I think that he's a Republican, and I think his energy and his initiative and the things that he's sponsoring, I think he's really impressive. His energy is quite impressive.
Okay. What does winning look like for this campaign, even if you don't become governor?
I think getting my ideas out and painting a picture of what California could be, and focusing on the future and focusing on losing the polarity between us in favor of us joining together to craft the best future for all of us that we can.
I have a question.
Okay.
Of all the qualified gubernatorial candidates, if it's not going to be you for governor, who would you choose?
Oh, that's a tough one.
I don't know yet.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know yet. I think that the Democrat Party has a problem. They've been in power since 1959 in the state. And I think that a lot of times they're locked into certain policies they can't get rid of because the party wouldn't let them get rid of it. So I'm very leery of them, although there's some really good people running. It seems like this McMahon of the mayor of San Jose seems like a sharp young guy and knowledgeable, and I like the way he presents himself, etc. But I don't have a favorite right now, and yet I ultimately will have to make that choice, possibly. But as much as it sounds like climbing a cliff straight up, we're in this to win, and we're going to keep going.
Okay. All right. It's been we don't want to keep you all night. It's been coming up on the hour, so I did want to give you a chance to let people know where they could find you, support you, social media, a website, stuff like that, and they can learn more about you and your policy position. Because there's a lot on your website. Like I said at the beginning of the show, we didn't touch upon everything. I think we touched on maybe uh, less than a third, if a quarter, of your entire platform. So where can
I
people
talk too
find you?
much.
No. Like we told you before we hopped on, I said this is your time to talk and expand your ideas. We like people who expand their ideas and not do the little news hits, because we're not the local news asking you for 30 seconds. So where can people find you and support you or learn more about your platform?
My website is www.woodardforgovernor2026.com. So woodardforgovernor2026.com. If you go on there, you can find my history, my policies, a lot of talks I've given, etc., and my platforms, and also a way to get in touch with us if they have questions or would like to volunteer, or there's a donate button, which we could always use, etc. So our website pretty much contains that.
Okay. Well, Tom, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your platform and everything that you stand for and everything you're doing. Well, not everything. Like I said, there's still a lot more. But being a voice in this race and presenting us with creative and unique and innovative ideas. So thank you for coming on tonight. And to everybody who tuned in tonight, thank you for tuning in live or listening on the audio wherever you listened. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, review, all of that stuff helps with the algorithm, helps more people find us. And the best way that you can help this show that is 100% free is you can share it with someone else. So with that, we'll see you on the next one. Good night, everybody. Later.